Hi, I'm Madeline James, and today I wanted to talk about planning writing projects. This is not a definitive guide. I am not an expert. This should not be taken as expert advice. This is my process, my experience, my thoughts, and what impact planning out my writing projects has had on my productivity. This video is going to be broken up into these sections, and I will include times below. Before this year, the last book I finished was in early high school. I started a number of fantasy projects since then that didn't really go anywhere, and then I started my blood magic project 5 years ago now. And those first 4 years were planning, outlining, world building, and writing little scenes here and there. I had no direction. I had no plan. I wasn't making a lot of real progress, and I was not happy with how much writing I was doing. I had no goals or timelines. I just had this vague idea of someday I want to publish. And that was really it. And that clearly did not work for me. About a year ago, I found AuthorTube, and I realized that if I wanted to publish, I needed to start actually working towards that as a goal and actually create a plan to try and get there if I ever wanted to accomplish it. So about a year ago, at the end of 2020, I started working towards publishing. I began doing a ton of research on both traditional and self-publishing. I created my social media accounts to start my author platform, and I set the goal of trying to finish my first draft by the end of 2021. I started in January with 10,000 words that had taken me 4 years to write. And in July, I finished my first draft with 130,000 words. And I had a baby in there. There are other things that came into play here for me actually finishing that first draft. And if you're curious, I can make a full video about how I got myself to actually finish my first draft if people are curious about how I did it. But setting a plan, really understanding what I wanted, what the steps were to getting there, and going full steam ahead towards it is, I think, what really helped me finish my book. To really plan out writing projects, you need 2 things: the steps that you need to take to get there, and how long each of those steps is going to take you. So a few important things to note. 1, my process is not going to work perfectly for you. 2, the right plan or process for your current writing project may not be the right one for your next project. 3, planning, writing, revising, these are all going to take different amounts of time for everyone, and it can change over time. 4, your plan is going to change as you go. Especially with your first few writing projects, you are still learning. You are still figuring out your process, what works best for you. You're still, learning your craft, learning about structure, figuring out how long things take you. So these plans are going to be a lot more flexible in the beginning. The important part of planning, in my opinion, is just going through and thinking about the steps you want to take, thinking about what you think will work best for you, estimating it, and creating these little milestones that you can kind of track your process with. So have you finished the first quarter of your draft? Have you finished the second quarter of your draft? Have you finished your outline? Have you finished, revising the first 10 chapters? Have you created a revision guide? All of those little steps turn this giant, overwhelming process of writing a novel into rungs on a ladder that you can step and go up one at a time and kind of be able to see how long that should take you and estimate that. The other really important thing here is to track everything you do. Write down how long it takes. Keep a log. And this is more than just, keeping track of how many words an hour you can write. This is okay, for my first revision, how long does it take to do a chapter on average? How long does it take for me to create an outline? How long does it take me to create, the character for a POV? All these little tiny pieces that you can then use in the future when you're making future writing project plans, and have a better idea of how long these things are going to take you. The first stage is your pre-writing phase, and this is going to be your planning, your world building, your outlining, your character development. And this more than all the other ones, is going to really depend on what type of writer you are. If you are a 100% pantser, you might not have this phase, or it may be like a week. If you're a complete plotter like I am, where I had multiple notebooks of just world building and other planning and outlining and a 40-page outline before I really started to write, that phase is going to take a lot longer. If you're planning to write a 50,000 word book, you're not going to need to plan as long. If you're planning on writing a $150,000 like epic novel, it's going to take a lot longer. And the type of genre is going to matter here too. If you're writing something like historical fiction or something where there's a lot of real world events or science or anything that you don't already know, you need to factor in research time. If you're doing something like a fantasy novel or sci-fi or something like that where you have to do a lot of world building, you need to factor in time for that too. And then the other thing to keep into account is how much learning you want to do in here. Do you want to research Enneagrams for building your characters? Do you want to study Save the Cat Writes a Novel and learn about story beats? Just in general, if there are different things about craft, like while you're about to use them is a decent time to look into them. So you need to consider that time too. When I did my the current project that I'm kind of in the planning phase for, I spent weeks going through and really studying a bunch of different story structures and breaking them down and sort of understanding how they worked and what all the different pieces were so I could come up with what structure I wanted to use for my initial outline. I don't think you have to like follow story structure religiously, but I think it's really helpful craft-wise to understand them, learn from them, and maybe use them as a good starting point. I tried to do some research online of how long the planning phase takes people, and there wasn't a lot of examples. You can see, how much time it took people to write a novel, like all over the place, but in terms of actually planning it, there wasn't a lot of it. But from what I can sort of gather, for a pantser, pretty pantsy pantser, a week to about a month seems to be the average, unless they're also building a whole world. For plotters, I kind of think maybe a month is probably the minimum for creating your outlines, your characters, all that stuff at a minimum. And a lot of it seems that it can go into months. If you're a really heavy plotter, especially in fantasy, I think it taking, 6 months to a year is not unheard of. For an over-plotter, over-world builder like me, I really need to give myself deadlines. Like, you're allowed to work on this for this amount of time. And, if I'm like, I'm really close, I really need this time to really finish it and have it good enough, I'll give myself that extra time. But having a timeline to try and stick to really helps keep me under control. For my Magic Forged project, which is the one that is currently in this pre-writing phase for me, I have about 3.5 to 4 months of planning kind of blocked out in my schedule. So this is my planning notebook, and this part may be blurry if I find out that you can read more in parts of it than I want you to, but when I went through and did this for my Magic Forge, I went through and documented story structure. So I have the story beats of Saves the Cat. I have 4-act structure, Dan Harmon's story structure, the 5-act structure, notes from Alexa Dunn's videos that I liked, Katie Tastic's 27-part outline, just a bunch of different notes and different structures that I kind of went through and did. I marked out the romance beats from a video. I don't remember which one I got this from. I have world history notes, some civilization notes, magic notes, archetypes and epic fantasy that I wanted to keep in mind. Just like a ton of stuff in this book that I've kind of gone through, and like you can see, like I have a lot of stuff in here. So this is sort of the furthest back plan I have, written down like this. So basically, because I was finishing up my blood magic project, I kind of wrote out all the different stages that I thought I wanted to follow. when I thought I'd be working on them, and then I kind of took the chunks of time where I was going to be taking a break, or it was going to be with critique partners or editors or that sort of thing. And I kind of wrote out those little time chunks. So like I'd have a month, and then 2 months, and then another month, and then another month, and then, just however much time I needed. And I made a to-do list of all the things I needed to figure out. So general history and magic, creating a geographic map, laying out old and new civilizations, expanding the timeline, creating characters, expanding the outline, expanding on settings, like just, all these little things. I wrote down how long I thought they would take, and then I kind of broke them into sections based off these months that I had, so that I had tasks. So my first 1 month period of time, I was working on general history and magic, creating my initial geographic map, and the layout of a few other things ended up working into there. And I think that the big key there is going to be write down a list of all the different things that you need to come up with. Every story is going to have, general structure. Even if you're a pantser, you need to have at least some sort of concept to get started, even if it's a 1-sentence kind of blurb. Some people say that you should write your whole blurb or synopsis before you start writing your novel. Some people write really thorough outlines. Some people write a lot of information about characters. Like if you want to do a character questionnaire or create little character bio type things. If you want to, create a map and world build and create different organizations. Try to break it into as many reasonable chunks as you can. So you could even have a bullet for each of your main characters, or a bullet for main POVs, side characters, tertiary characters, that sort of a thing. And then, figure out how long those steps will take. And I think that really helps because it's a lot more than you expect it to be. And some of these things have stages too. So if you're a plotter, you might write out, a plan for a rough outline, which may just have your climax, your inciting incident, maybe a little bit of build-up, and your resolution, where you want it to end. That may be all you have at first. And as you then also go back and create the world, create your characters, you're going to be fleshing out that outline more and more. And that's kind of what my process is. World building is really important for me. So once I get the initial sort of idea for my characters, my world, my story, I go through and I really flesh out my world building. I have maps, a lot of maps. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I go extra. And I just really like to kind of start there and have that really inspire things as I work up. And then I go back through and I kind of figure out my characters a little bit deeper. I figure out, what kind of organizations that we're going to have in this world inspired by the world history and, the state of the world and the things that have happened recently. And then where my characters and the side characters would fit into those organizations, into the civilization. And then once I kind of have characters, then I go through and really, really build up that outline and kind of do, this time I'm doing beats. Last time I did it through scene stickies, where I wrote a scene on a sticky note and then I can move them around. But I'm trying to do kind of my own custom beats. A lot of them are Save the Cat beats, but there's a lot of them from other places too. And it's a long process, but having that checklist and going through it all has really helped me. And I kind of know when I'm going to roughly get through it. And kind of if I have a month, these are the things I want to figure out. And I give myself a little wiggle room, but it's you gotta kind of not just go too far. It kind of puts a little ending there. Okay, once I've been working on this for a week, I really need to get to a stopping point. The next step is the first draft, the drafting phase, the zero draft phase. This depends a little bit on your process. If you're doing a really rough first draft, if you kind of tend to do a little bit of editing as you go, if you're a clean first drafter or a messy first drafter, I am pretty messy myself. So exactly what you're doing there is going to depend on the person, but this is probably the easiest stage to plan, in my opinion, because you basically just need to figure out how much you have to write and how fast you write. I think it's really good, even if you're a really big pantser, to kind of have an idea of how long you want your novel to go. And, this may just be what the mainstream genre expectations are for what you're trying to write. Like, if you're writing a romance, it's going to be a little shorter. If you're writing an epic fantasy, it can be a good bit longer. So have an idea for how long you want your book to be, maybe how many words, and then do some experiments if you need to, if you don't already know how fast you write. I figured out that I can do like 30,000 to 40,000 words in a month fairly easily if I kind of stick to it in my first draft. So once you figure that out and you either figure out how many hours you need, based off the word count to kind of write your whole draft expected, or if you're doing it by like how long it takes you to write a chapter, or if you're doing it by like how much you can write per writing session, I would just go through, and there's so many great advices for this. I do really like Sarah Cannon with Heart Breathing. She has so many good videos for actually planning this out, and I'm going to link a ton of them. But I also have a video on planning your writing sessions to kind of try and get it done. So you start with a word count, you look at a calendar, you figure out when you can write, how much you can write a day, and kind of really, it uses a point system to figure out how much you need to write a day to hit your goals. And doing something like that is really helpful. So to start with planning out my drafting, for the month of June, and this is where I really started hitting, really defined word counts this year, I just wrote down what my total word count was and how many words I had written that day. And through the month of June, and you can see I had a number of 0 word count days, I wrote 35,000 words, and that was pretty reasonable for me. And I kind of calculated out, how many words I was averaging per chapter, how many chapters I had left to write, how many words I thought I had left to go, and how many days, so that I kind of had an idea of how much longer I was going to be drafting for. And then when I did July, and I can't find my plan for this, but it is in that other video if you want to watch that. I made it through basically 40,000 words, and, it wasn't that bad. And I had a newborn in here, so, like, it was kind of a weird time. But this gave me a good idea of how much I could write at a time. And so in my plans for the first draft of my Magic Forged project, I have a really good idea of how many words I can write a month. And if I say 30,000 words, I've done 35,000, I've done 40,000. I should be able to get through, that many words pretty easily. So for my current plan for my Magic Forged project, I'm planning on getting into drafting in May of 2022. So I have, draft 1, write 20,000 words in the second part of May here. And then moving into the rest of 2022, I have a chunk of 40,000 words here. That'll be a big month. And then 25,000, 30,000, and the last 5K. So, I'm working on my Blood Magic project in here too. But this sort of tells me that, like, okay, my goal is to be done with that draft by the end of February 2023. So the next stage is the revising and editing part. And I think for most people, this is probably the longest part. And it's also one of the more unique parts for different people's processes. And it's changed a lot for me. Just going through and revising my Blood Magic project, I've changed my plan like 5 times. But again, like, you can look up, how to revise. What are the stages you can do there? And it can be like really simple. Like, you can just be like, okay, well, I'm going to revise 1 chapter at a time and then revise the next chapter. You can work in, having beta readers or alpha readers, critique partners, professional editing. You can work in whatever you need to do to, how clean you think your book is going to be. And this is also where it starts to matter if you're planning on self-publishing or traditionally publishing. If you're planning to query and traditionally publish, I think it's pretty widely recommended that you don't need to have any professional editing. I think some people even advise against it. I am planning on having a professional developmental editor go over my Blood Magic project before I query. But a lot of that is more for the learning experience of it. Like, I'm doing a lot of research on structure and all that stuff and learning kind of as much as I can on my own. But I feel like it's still kind of hard to see those things in your own book sometimes. So I'm hoping having an editor look at it will just kind of help me understand it a little bit more and give me a lot more knowledge that I can then utilize in later books. If you are planning on self-publishing, you're probably going to want to do the whole process, enchilada, whatever. Like, you're probably going to want to do developmental editing, copy editing, line editing, proofreading, all of those stages, along with, multiple rounds of betas, multiple rounds of critique partners. And, so that's probably going to be a lot longer for you. I think when I was planning on self-publishing, I think it was going to take me 2 years to go from first draft to having a final book. Not necessarily published, because there was going to be a little bit of extra time for working on like audiobooks and a bunch of other stuff. But like in terms of getting the book to the quality that I wanted it to be published, it was going to take me like 2 years. And that's just like, if you write your first book and you take a break for a couple months and then you do your first big pass and then you send it to critique partners for a month or two and then you do another pass and then you send it to critique partners again, another pass, beta readers, another pass, beta readers, another pass, line editing, copy editing, proofreading, sending it off to, all these different editors, and that takes time when you have to kind of wait on other people. So my revision plan for my Blood Magic project is basically by the end of the year, I want to finish dev edits. And this breakdown is not, quite how it's working out. The beginning chapters need a lot more help than the later ones do. Here we go. This is how I am tracking my dev edits. I have 8 weeks until the end of the year when I first put this together, and I have 6 chapters that I want to get done a week, which gives me, an extra day each week, and then, a little bit of extra wiggle room at the end to catch up if I need to, and I'm just kind of tracking this as I go, and that's really helpful for me, but I want to finish dev edits by the end of the year, send my book to that professional developmental editor, and then I've given myself almost 2 months to go through and address the dev comments. And I think it'll really depend how big the notes are here. Like, if I have to do a whole rewrite, this is going to take a lot longer. I'm not expecting to have to do a full rewrite here. I very thoroughly outlined. I had multiple people go over my outline. I actually had a professional developmental assessment of my outline about a year ago before I really started writing, and I did rework some stuff before then. So this is what I have in there now, and it might change. And then I plan on sending it to critique partners, and then I plan on addressing their critiques. And then after I address the critiques, send to betas, address all their issues, do copy and line edits, proofread, and then, at the end of October, I'm expecting to have a revised book. And this is for traditional publishing. Like I mentioned before, I would be spending a lot more time and going through a lot more different levels of editing and different types of editors if I was going to self-publish this, but I am planning on querying it. So hopefully at the end of October, I will be ready to, start querying in November. We'll see if that happens. At the point that you have a completely finished book, what you're going to do next is really going to depend on whether or not you are now querying or self-publishing. There are a ton of videos for both of those. I think self-publishing is obviously you need to plan for that a little bit more because that takes a lot of your time and effort, and you know exactly what kind of needs to happen. I'll try to link a couple really cool videos that I liked about self-publishing plans, I guess. But, you know, you're going to need to get your cover art. You're going to need to work on your blurbs, work on your synopses, come up with a marketing plan, come up with, you know, like release schedules and format your book. And, you know, like it takes a lot of time to go through each of those steps. And you should probably have a plan for that part, just like this, if you're doing this. Since I'm querying, the extent of my plan is really just giving me a month to get the ball rolling. So this is going to be where I'm working on putting together my query package, making sure all of that's really good, doing my research on agents and who I want to query, putting them into batches. And I'm thinking a month is going to be good to get that started, mostly because I do not think I'm going to completely wait until then to do any of that. I like organizing and I like spreadsheets, and I'm probably gonna I don't know, if I get a little extra time here or there, be like, I'm gonna, work on my spreadsheet and be a total, nerd. But at the end of that month, I'm mostly just going to be doing rounds of querying. And this isn't something I can plan because it depends on how long it takes agents to get back to me, how many rounds of querying I have to do. But I'm giving my other planning after that a little bit more wiggle room. So when I was going through my drafting plan for my Magic Forged project, I'm kind of underestimating that a little bit, and that's so that I will have room to go through and do more rounds of querying in there. It shouldn't take that much time, but you want to be able to have a couple evenings when you're ready to send out another round of querying to have the time to go through and do that. So that's how I'm planning out that stage. I have a plan, like a rough plan for how long it would take to do self-publishing. I don't really feel qualified to share that with you guys because I've never actually done it. I've learned so much about planning in general since I made that plan. I might show it to you guys as long as you, I don't know, keep that in context. But there are so many really good plans. A lot of people that self-publish will share on YouTube there are a lot of people on YouTube who have shared their publishing plans and their timelines and everything. So you can definitely find those to kind of walk you through that part of the process a little bit better. So something you will have probably already picked up on is that I plan on sort of having 2 writing projects going at a time. And I think there are a lot of benefits to this. I think this helps give me a little bit of space and breathing room where I can switch between the projects when, my main project, which right now is my Blood Magic project, when that is with betas or critique partners or editors or, whatever, or if I just need to take a break from it before I kind of get started on the next round of revising or whatever. Having another writing project to work on will kind of keep things fresh, allow me to work on other skills. And the other thing is I'm planning on querying. So if I start querying in November, 1 year from now, oh boy. Yeah. If I start querying in 1 year, I will probably, give querying that project about a year of, really focused effort. And at that point, I want to kind of move on to the next thing. I am very open to the concept that my Blood Magic project may not be a book that I ever publish. I think it is right now. I think it's good enough. I really do. I think that I can get it there. I think that, I'm going to put the work in to have it be something that's publishable. But I could be wrong. And it's something that I've seen in a lot of people's publishing journeys, especially traditionally published, that, they query their first book. And it's not necessarily that first book that's going to sell and get you an agent. It might be your second book or your third book. And you learn so much through the process of writing and revising and planning a book. just my outlining and planning phases from my first project to my second big project there's huge improvements there. Just writing my first draft of my blood magic project was like, I improved so much. Like the first chapters, like going back and rereading that when I did my reread, the quality difference is kind of disgusting. How bad the beginning is compared to the end. So if I'm going to improve that much, my skill levels right now may not be quite what they need to be to publish. So I want to be prepared to query another project. So with my current plan, I'm going to start querying in November, give it about a year. And, you know, depending on how things go, like if I'm getting a lot of full requests and, you know, I've gotten some, you know, rewrite and resubmits or just, you know, stuff like that where I kind of like think I have a chance with that still, you know, I'll go a little longer. But so the way this would probably work out is I would be ready to start querying my second project after I'd been querying my first project for a little over a year, you know, in a few months. And I think that would work out really well. I'd have some time to kind of, you know, get over the sadness of shelving a project, have a few extra months in there to kind of work on getting it out. And then I'd be, you know, I'd know if I was giving up on this project that I'm a few months away from querying the next one. I feel like it'd be a lot harder to give up on a project if I hadn't, you know, started another one. Or if I was working on a series and I had moved into the next book in that series instead of a completely different project, I would be really sad to, you know, give up on all of that stuff that I'd been writing, both of those books, potentially even the third book if that's what I'd started to revise in between revising the second one. And I don't think that would work very well for me. So, because I'm traditionally publishing, that's the plan. I started, you know, the second project is a completely different series. I think that if you're going to self-publish and your plan is to self-publish anyway, it makes sense to go through the series so that you can publish those, you know, back to back. There isn't a maybe you'll publish this if you're going to self-publish the first book in a series, you know, like that's pretty safe. So I think it makes sense then to go through everything in the series if you're self-publishing, but I do not think there is anything wrong with self-publishing. I would be surprised if I don't ever self-publish anything. Like, I would expect me to probably be a hybrid at some point. But I do, based off my goals and the way I write and what I write, I'm aiming for traditional publishing. And I do not want to give up on traditionally publishing just because I can't wait. Just because I'm too sad to put aside a project and give up on years of progress. Like, I am aiming for traditionally publishing with this mindset that I need to make sure that I'm writing something that's ready for it. So giving myself the time and setting things up so that it will be easier for me to find that project that's going to be good enough quality to be traditionally published is really important for my planning. So this is going to be different for everyone, different based off what type of publishing you want to do, based off, I guess, how you work, how you're motivated. But I think it's something that's very important to keep in mind while you're planning so that you don't back yourself into a corner in the future. I have a feeling this video is already pretty long. But yeah, this is just a look at how I plan my writing projects, how like immensely helpful this has been for me. And it's fun. It's really nice to have these little milestones and things that you kind of break down and actually quantify what you're doing and not have it be this open-ended, I'm writing a novel that I've been writing for years that I'm probably going to continue writing for years and who knows when I'll reach the end. Like, that's hard. So yeah, if you have, you know, if you have any questions or if you want to share kind of your writing process or how you plan down below, I'd love to see it. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.